I'm Nick from Local Spicery, and today we're going to conquer one of the Everests of the culinary world, paella. And we're not just going to make any paella. We have to make something that's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more interesting. So I know we think of paella as a seafood dish, and we think of it as this huge mound of fish and fruit de mer, sometimes with some sausage in it or something. But what we're going to do instead, we're going to make this vegan. And you know, you may be thinking, well, how can you make a big fish dish like that into something that's vegan? Bear with me. I want you to hear me out, because paella, it's fundamentally a rice dish. Okay, it's a saffron infused rice, and on top of it, you put a pile of foods that all have strong, distinctive flavors and beautiful colors. And in both cases, if it's fish or vegetables, it's the quality of the ingredients that really matters. And if you play with the ingredients just right, you're going to end up with a spectacular vegan dish that you can serve to anybody and get rave reviews. Before we get too far, I just want to talk briefly about the spices that I'm using. I'm using 2 blends that come from our collection, and you can buy any of these on our website at www.localspicery.com. I'll also add, if you're looking for the recipe for this paella, you can find it also on our website at localspicery.com/blog, or if you go to our webpage and scroll down from the front page, you'll see the screen will have a picture of a bluish kitchen behind me. That's my test kitchen, and the word blog, and click into that and you'll find the recipe. The 2 blends that I'm using, one is what we call Bada Bouillon, and Bada Bouillon is our salt-free veggie broth powder. It has absolutely no no chemicals, no additives whatsoever. All that goes in this are vegetables that have been dried and milled and blended. And the reason why it goes so well with this recipe is that the flavor profile of Bada Bouillon is a very rich, umami-focused broth. It's got mushrooms, it's got tomatoes, it's got carrots, it's got onions, and these are all the flavors that you really want in your broth. So that's a good one. Put a tablespoon of this in a cup of hot water, and you've got broth that you can use. The other one is our Basque seasoning, and this one, we actually learned this recipe when we were traveling through the Basque region in the south of France. We were looking to procure some Pimenton for our company, and we came across this, which is really sort of the fundamental of every Basque dish that we had. It's called chimichurri. Now, we all think we know what that means, right? Chimichurri, well, it's that little dish of pesto that they give me in the Brazilian restaurant. But actually, the word chimichurri in Basque means just a blend or a mixture, and it's not distinct any blend or mixture. But in this case, it's a blend of dried herbs, and it has a little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic, and it's just a tiny amount of a medium hot, very sweet red chili pepper. And by a very small amount, it's not enough that you would ever have this and think that it's generating heat and you can't stand it. It's just enough that you'll get a slight tickle at the back of your mouth that makes the whole thing taste richer, and it gives it that sense that, yeah, this is coming from the Basque country. There are two base spices that we use. One is smoked paprika, and I would say use a very good quality smoked paprika. Ours is a Pimenton. It comes from Spain. It's also grown certified organic. But if you have a smoked paprika that's in your spice cabinet, go ahead and use it. One nice thing about using an actual Spanish Pimenton is that a high quality Spanish Pimenton, the smoke profile is going to come from either oak or cork oak trees. Cork oak trees, and it does give it a distinctive flavor that when it comes across in the rice, and it is flavored really traditionally Basque. But if you've already got some, go ahead, knock yourself out. The last thing I want to talk about is kind of the star in most people's eyes of a paella, and that is saffron. Saffron is the most expensive spice in the world. We sell it in this jar, but when you open it up, what comes out is this little pouch. It's a gram of saffron. A gram of saffron sounds like a very, very small amount, but when you think in terms of 1/10 of a gram, because that's what I figure you should use for a serving of anything that you're flavoring with saffron, you know, it's not really that expensive. You know, it is kind of pricey. I think on our website we sell it for $13.50 or so. But when you think that that's 10 servings, it's not really so bad. But I do want to talk just a little bit about quality of saffron, because if you're going to be spending a lot of money for something, you better get something that's worth it. That is a very high quality saffron. You can see there's no yellow, there's no orange. It's a very, very deep, dark red, bright color. When you see a saffron that looks like that, I mean, if I poured it out, you see they're fairly long threads as well. It means that it is a grade. If it came from Spain, they would call it coupé. If it came from Iran, they would call it sargol. What that means is that when they are harvesting the stamens from the crocus saffron, these are the stamens from the flower. There are only 3 stamens in a flower. 1 gram of saffron is 150 flowers worth of stamens. But when they harvest it, they clip the ends and they cut off the portions that are yellow or that are orange, because the yellow and the orange ones have very little to no flavor. So when they go in, they are diluting the overall flavor of the saffron. You're really getting less flavor if you're not getting a higher quality. I'll tell you just a little bit, you know, a little anecdote on our saffron and why we are really, really proud about it. It is imported by a company that is owned by a couple. The wife actually is an old friend of my wife's. They went to high school together. And in the Gulf War, for those of you that can remember that far back, they actually created a non-profit organization to look at ways to try to stem the tide of opium poppies coming out of Afghanistan. And their idea was to take these farmers and teach them how to grow saffron, because Afghanistan borders right up against Iran. Iran is where 90% of the saffron in the world comes from. It's a very, very good area for growing saffron. And they got funding from the U.S. government, and it has been very, very successful. And they're frankly generating some of the best saffron I've seen anywhere. They call this saffron negin or super negin. Negin in Persian means jewel-like, which is due to the color. But it is a very, very strong, powerful flavor, and a very, very strong, powerful story about how buying a simple jar of saffron, you actually can be helping to save the world. We love it. So I'm going to get right into this. Let's talk about the 3 elements of a paella. There's the saffron broth, which infuses the rice and is then underlays the saute of the vegetables. That whole first part I've already done, but I'm going to walk you through it. In order to make the rice, I begin with just some chopped onion and some garlic. I saute it. When I saute without any oil. I use just a little bit of water for deglazing because I don't frankly need the extra oil. And then the rice goes in and the spices go in. In this case, the spices that are going in are the chimichurri. I put about a tablespoon and a half of chimichurri. I put about a teaspoon of the smoked paprika. And the saffron goes in the broth. So I made 2 cups of veggie broth, which in this case was 2 tablespoons of the Bada bean powder in hot water with slightly less than half of this pouch. Okay, this is a gram. I'm cooking 4 servings, so I want 0.4 of a gram of saffron to go in this. In this case, I did something I've never done before, but it was very satisfactory. I'll probably do it a lot more. I took that broth and I ran it through the blender, and it became quite a bit more homogeneous. So the rice goes in, you pour the broth on top of it, and you put it on. You stir it that one time, and then you back away. You don't touch it again. And the reason why is that the saffron rice for paella, you want a relatively dry rice. You don't want a creamy rice. This is not a polenta. We know that polenta is creamy and smooth. This is very different. You want distinct strands of rice, which is why the quality of the rice you use is important. A lot of times you'll read a recipe and they'll specifically say, you have to use Spanish rice, you have to use La Bamba or whatever. And frankly, it's almost impossible to find that. If you have it, that's great. If you don't, any short grain rice, white rice is good. I have seen recipes that call for, a short grain brown rice. But what you're looking for is a rice that's going to soak up as much of the liquid and therefore flavor as possible. Short grain rices, they soak up about 2 times their weight in when you cook with them. Generally, long grain rices is more of a 1-to-1, so that's why we use a short grain rice. In this case, I'm using something that comes from California. We call it Calrose. It's a very common type of a short grain rice. Risotto rice, that's fine as well. Make sure it's not the instant type. It is a short grain rice. It'll work well. But the key is that once you add the broth, you don't stir it again, because you want it just to sit there, you want it to simmer, and you want it to pull all of the flavors into the rice. And you're trying to create a crust on the outside of the pan that is kind of the distinctive and one of the best parts of the whole dish of the paella. In this case, I did mine using my cast iron skillet, which is a perfect vessel because it's relatively shallow. Because it's cast iron, it transmits the heat very readily. And when it's done, it's about like that. It simmers for 20 minutes and then the rice is ready. And that's what it's supposed to look like when you're ready for the next step. So let's get ourselves into the next step. I'm going to turn this off because I think it's done and ready. Got the crust generated right there. So let's just get into our saute of vegetables. I want to talk about the ingredients. First and foremost, this is just red onion. You want to get the sweetest onion you can get. You can see how big the chunks are. I basically cut this onion into eighths and just left it at that and separated them so they're nice and flat. I did this. There's a dish that I love, comes from my past. It's a Peruvian dish that is kind of a paella, and the star in that dish, I think, is the onion and the sweet flat pieces of onion. I wanted to put mushroom in this because to me mushroom is really kind of the best rich meaty in your face kind of a main dish. I was hoping to do chanterelles. I couldn't get any this time of year, so what I'm using instead, these are sliced already, but they're fresh shiitake. I debated using oyster mushrooms. I think oyster mushrooms would be superb. You can use just your traditional white mushrooms or cremini mushrooms would be fine as well. But in this case, it's about the ingredients, and the gift that you're giving people are the ingredients you put in. You want to feel good about it. So do the best you can. The other, I wanted to get some green in there, and in this case, I love asparagus, so I've got some asparagus. I'm going to just show you how I cut it up. This is, it's washed and cut in about 1 inch long pieces. Bring some red color in. I've got some. This is roasted bell pepper. That's 1 bell pepper that I broiled in the oven and then peeled and sliced. And then, to come into the Spanish roots, we've got some artichoke hearts and some olives here. The artichoke hearts I quartered, the olives I just sliced. I did rinse the olives to get some of the salt off. I really try to cook salt-free as much as I can. And the last thing, and this doesn't show up in the recipe because I think it's got to be very hard to find. I've never seen them before, but I saw them and I fell in love with them. So I'm going to throw these in. They're just gorgeous. Anybody ever seen something like that before? Try purple Brussels sprouts. And I'll tell you, these ones I've already pre-cooked because Brussels sprouts take a little longer to cook than the rest of those things. This is what they looked like when I found them at the store. Aren't they gorgeous? Absolutely gorgeous. And they taste delicious. These ones, I just lightly steamed them and cut them in half and steamed them to the point where they're just getting a little soft, so they only really need to be heated up. And that's kind of the entirety of what we're going to be putting on top of our rice. So let's fire it up and let's get this thing going. As I mentioned earlier, when I saute, I like to saute without oil. Those of you that are not trying to reduce oil in your diet, you're fine doing it the way you normally do it. This is how I do it. I'm going to start with the onions because the onions are going to have to cook a little bit longer than the rest. We're going to do this in 3 lifts. First one being onion. The second one is going to be the mushrooms and the asparagus. And the third one is going to be the artichokes, and the olives, which really just need to be heated up, and then we're done. One thing, when I do saute without oil, I like to have a little bit of water or broth on the side just for deglazing. You know, if the vegetables start to stick to the pan, I'll deglaze it a little bit. In this case, I'm going to put a little bit more. I'm actually going to put some lemon juice and a little bit of water in it, and I'm going to, when this pan gets good and hot, and after I've got these onions where I want them, I kind of want to steam the vegetables a little bit. Remember, this is going to go on top of that big pot full of rice, so it can have some liquid to it. I would actually be tempted to, this would be an excellent application for a little bit of dry white wine. Thought about doing it with dry white wine. I just decided in this case not to, but some dry white wine and a little bit of lemon would be superb, so sort of a picata flavor. These lemons are they're from our Meyer lemon tree here at the house. I like the Meyer lemon because it's not quite as acidic. It works better in this context. I do have a couple of Eureka lemons, which I'm also going to use for squeezing on top where I really want that big acidic bite to come in. Okay, so that's ready. And I'm just going to wander over here and put a little bit of water in this because I don't want it to be sour at all. I just want a little bit of a citrus flavor. And we're going to get a spoon. So the key to these onions, and I'm doing this, I'm putting this at a very high heat, 450 degrees, because I want them to actually begin to caramelize. I want to get some color, and even if it got to the point that there was a little bit of carboning on the onions, that would be fine. I don't want them to be burned, but just a little bit of carboning, does sort of accentuate the sweet flavor of onions. The other thing I'm going to do at the end of this, and this is a perfect application for just a little bit of balsamic vinegar squeezed on the top. In this case, this comes from a company called California Balsamic. This is their Gilroy garlic. It's a garlic flavored vinegar. They flavor it using fresh garlic. It's actually a fantastic product, and is going to go great with this dish. So you can't quite see this as well as I can see it, but I can see we're already starting to get little flecks of color into the onion. A lot of people, when they start trying to saute without any water, they try to use a lower temperature because they're worried about if the oil is going to keep it from burning. I actually find that it's the opposite. I like to saute at a very high temperature so that I can roll it over relatively quickly. I can get these caramelized colors in more rapidly, and in just a few minutes of sauteing, I start to get a translucent, soft look and feel to the onions, which is where I want it to get. I think while I got your attention, I'll come back just a little to the Bada Bouillon. That's one product that really has fundamentally changed the way that I cook. The best things about it, it's completely shelf stable, so you don't, once you use it, don't have to put it in the refrigerator and then force yourself to try to find a way to use it. exactly the quantity you use for the recipe that you're doing. It also comes together very quickly. So if I'm doing something like this, like sauteing, and instead of water I want to have a little bit of broth, I can make it in a matter of minutes, and it's very fast. And the flavor it really is quite a rich umami flavor. It was never intended to to create a soup in and of itself. It's supposed to play in the background and to enhance the flavor of other things, and it does that exceptionally well. Okay, I think we're about good enough there, so I'm going to start. Going to go from that to the asparagus. Just dump the asparagus in. Just want to stir this enough so everything gets a chance to meet Mr. Pan here. And I'll keep this going at a high temperature. As you can see, it comes together pretty darn quickly. I'm going to put the Brussels sprouts in simultaneous with the mushroom. I think they're about the same in terms of what they're looking for. This is that moment where the aroma starts to come off the pan. Just amazing. I'll tell you, when Evelyn and I were in the Esplet region, we were meeting with farmers to try to figure out where we were going to get our Esplet from. And I will point out, we don't currently have Esplet chili peppers available. We haven't been able to get them through the pandemic. They were available to us last year, but just we couldn't schedule the trip in. You have to get there really right around the end of the harvest time to be able to get the good product. So if you can't get to the Esplet region in the October, November time frame, you're going to end up with a less than perfect product. But we stayed at a little bed and breakfast, and they offered a dinner one night. They said, if you want to kick a little bit more money into the kitty, you can join us for dinner. And the dinner they made was a gigantic paella like this. They had a paella pan that was this big around, and they did, as it would be traditionally, the paella was cooked over a giant charcoal fire. So you know that paella is generally cooked at a very high temperature, and it's cooked very, very fast. Okay. So now I'm putting in the fresh shiitake mushroom. And the purple Brussels sprouts, which actually, when you cook them, they go from a purple color to a beautiful blue color. They're absolutely gorgeous. Another interesting thing on saffron, and this is particularly Spanish saffron. Spain has a big name in the world of saffron growing. A lot of people think of it as a very important saffron growing area. A lot of us have traveled through the Spanish countryside and seen the beautiful blue flowers that dot it in the saffron farms. But they produce a very small portion compared to what's coming out of Iran. And one of the interesting things, there actually was a study looking into sourcing, and the study began with looking at the total production in 1 year of saffron coming out of Spain, and they compared that to how much saffron was in the marketplace claiming to be Spanish saffron, and it was off by like a factor of 5 and in the wrong direction. So it's one of my concerns with the Spanish saffron. I really generally am putting in the artichokes and the olives now, which means we're getting close. But generally, I won't sell Spanish saffron. We do from time to time, but only when it is extremely well sourced, when I know the person who imported it, I know where they're getting it from. I know what kind of standards they set and how they know they're, exactly what it is. There's just 2 or 3 spices that have that kind of reputation, and Spanish saffron is one of them. The other one that's a big one for me is Mexican vanilla. There we go. You see the steam that comes up? I just put a little bit of that onion in, so with that steam, I'm basically lightly steaming the entirety of the vegetables that are in here. This is an absolutely gorgeous, colorful plate full of veggies. I'm going to have to get a picture in close before I move on to show you the beautiful colors in this dish. There it is. Isn't that spectacular? It's just so, I mean, the reds and the purples coming off those onions, and the blues coming off of the Brussels sprouts. Got greens from the artichoke hearts and the asparagus. It is a beautiful, beautiful dish. Let's bring our rice forward here. Got a bay leaf here. I'm going to just go ahead and put that right now. No, that's not it. One of the keys, how do you know that the rice is done when you're simmering the rice? The only way is to take a tiny bit in a fork and taste it on the mouth to make sure. But you want it, I like it just slightly al dente, but you want the rice to the point where you're going to end up serving it, because you don't spend a lot of time. Usually, this I had prepared in advance, but I would prepare this and then move immediately over to this. They kind of come together in about the same amount of time. I usually plan about an hour to prepare this whole dish, start to finish, which is, in the world of preparing dinners, really not a long time. It's beautiful. I'll put this over here. So before I plate this, I'm going to show you once again. It's probably going to look a lot like what I brought up before, but that, my friends, that's your vegan paella. So let's plate it and show you what it looks like on the inside, which gives me the opportunity to show you one of the elements that's important to a good paella, and that element is called socarrat. Socarrat is a Spanish word for the crust that is created when you cook rice in this manner. So this is a dish of rice. I told you you don't want to stir it at all, because it's cooking this crust on the outside. I'm actually going to use a spatula for serving this. And you can hear I am pulling crust off the bottom. And that crust is what makes this such a perfect dish. Okay? So that, friends, is your paella. I like to serve it with a wedge of lemon. Sometimes I'll sprinkle some greens on the top. In this case, I don't have any, so I'm just going to leave the wedge of lemon. There it is. Delicious. So I hope you check out the recipe on my website, www.localspicery.com/blog. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Nick at localspicery.com. Hope you enjoyed this meal.